Hey, what's up, homies? It's me, Captain Planet. How we doing today? I want to talk to you guys about coral restoration. And for any of you guys that are into this video, I highly recommend this book to you. This is Active Coral Restoration, Techniques for a Changing Planet by my homie, Dr. Coral, whereas the rest of the world knows him as Dr. David Vaughn. So I want to talk a little bit about some of Dr. Vaughn's techniques, techniques that I love. But first, to understand the techniques used to solve the problem, we have to understand the problem. And to understand the problem, we first have to understand what are corals. So corals, a lot of times people will ask me, Captain, are corals animals or plants or rocks or bacteria or what? And my answer is always, yeah. They're like all four of those things. So first and foremost, the coral is an animal, the coral animal. So its closest relative, believe it or not, is the jellyfish. So it starts its life, as this little larvae, in every single coral. When you look at a coral head, it's got all these dots all over it, right? Let me see if I can pull up a little picture since I got a coral book in front of me. It's got all these little different dots. Now these different dots are actually different corals of the same species. Here, for example, you see every one of those little dots, that's a polyp. Every single one of those has its own stomach, its own mouth, its own stinging tentacles that come out and attack its prey. So imagine all of these are different animals of the same species, the same family, living as a colony together. Now, a long time ago, the corals, they looked at an awesome algae friend of theirs. Well, it wasn't a friend at the time, but it would be. Its name's Zoox. Zooxanthellae to be exact. So imagine it like this. The coral looks over at the algae, Zooxanthellae, and says, hey bro, if I build a hard calcium carbonate hotel, would you want to move inside, maybe pay the rent and paint the house for me? And Zooxanthellae's like, yeah bro, like I keep living inside a jellyfish like Cassiopeia getting eaten by sea turtles. If I move inside this hard calcium carbonate hotel, then I'll be protected. So what I mean by hard calcium hotel, let me get another picture going. These coral reefs, right? Calcium carbonate is the same thing as limestone. So think of it like their skeletons are made out of limestone. So the algae, Zooxanthellae, he moves in. And he paints the house and he pays the rent. And what I mean by this is 90 to 98% of the energy that the coral animal needs to survive is actually received photosynthetically from the algae Zooxanthellae that lives inside. Kind of like paying the rent, like how I pay the landlord rent to rent this little trailer house here. So he also paints the house. Now what I mean by that is every single hard and soft coral, no matter what color it is, it gets its color from that algae Zooxanthellae in what we call a symbiotic relationship. Now, there is something going on that we're calling coral bleaching. Coral bleaching is when all these different colors of coral turn white as if they've been bleached. Now that we have kind of an understanding of the biology of coral, and we hear something like coral bleaching, now we understand that it's actually an algae problem that's becoming a coral problem. So what's going on? Corals have been around for over 550 million years. So they've been through several climate changes, several sea level changes. Why are they dying now? Well, perhaps it's because it's their first change with human beings, as far as first climate change with human beings. Now, When we talk about ocean acidification, guys, this is something caused by us human beings. So when carbon dioxide, like from our cars and factories and different things like that, when CO2 forms over H2O, water, a chemical reaction takes place and something is formed called carbonic acid. Now this carbonic acid directly competes with calcium carbonate, which is what we were talking about, how corals make their stony structure. Their skeletons are made out of calcium carbonate. So think of it like our pollution is direct competition with how they are forming. This isn't a good thing for us. Coral reefs, guys, even though they are less than 0.01% of the ocean, they are home to 25% of the species who live in the ocean. Some scientists say that coral reefs will become extinct by 2050. But me and Dr. Coral and a few other handful of scientists, we refuse to believe that. Because if 25% of the ocean goes extinct with those coral reefs, then the other 75% of the species will also be rocked. We cannot eat tuna if tuna does not have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's really common sense. And it's not a matter of us refusing to believe that. It's a matter of us being willing to do something about it. And this thick old book will tell you exactly some of the different techniques that we're using. So I would like to talk to you guys about a Eureka moment that happened with Dr. Vaughn. So a Eureka moment is what we refer to in science as like an accident happening, but yet a great understanding coming out of that accident. So we were growing corals to plant back out on the reef, right? And it would take about 3 to 5 years for a coral to get that big around, big enough for us to plant back out on the reef. Well, one day, Dr. Vaughn noticed that there was a coral that had fallen off of the rack and attached itself to the PVC pipe in his aquariums. So he went to pull on the coral to put it back up where it belonged. And when he pulled on it, it attached itself to the PVC, so it shattered. And when you spin this long, it takes 3 to 5 years to get a piece of coral big enough to grow out on the reef. That's a bummer. And so he wanted to pay attention to that and see how long it took for that piece of coral that had been shattered to die. Like, how long would it take for it to die due to stress? So there was 3 singular polyps. And remember, like I said, each polyp is its own individual, right? So there was 3 polyps left on the PVC pipe. And amazingly enough, when Dr. Vaughn went back to check on it in 2 weeks, it had grown what had previously taken us 3 to 5 years to be able to grow. So this was a Eureka moment in science and in coral restoration, because now we could go from taking 3 to 5 years to get a piece of coral to grow to getting that same amount to grow in 2 weeks. Well, he's taken that mentality and gone further with it, and we're doing what we call reskinning reefs. So imagine if this book was like a boulder from where a coral's dead, looks like a rock, but it's no longer alive. We could sit there and take a coral head, like a starlet coral, a boulder coral, and cut that up to where every single polyp is alone. And when that polyp is alone, it thinks it's a baby again. And it starts to grow exponentially. I mean, think about it. With us humans, how much do we grow from day 1 to year 5 to year 30 to year 35? We just didn't realize that it worked like that with corals until this accident happened. So what we're able to do is, if we take it from the same coral head, then that family of different beings is sharing the same genomes. And when we grow them separately, we can go back out to a dead coral. Let's just use this as an example. And we place them every few inches apart from one another. And in 2 years, they grow enough that they actually fuse back together. So we can do in 2 years what takes nature sometimes 1,800 years to accomplish. Typically a coral would not want to grow into one another, but when they're the same genome coming from that same specific family, they will fuse back together. It's quite natural. So it's pretty amazing in these times, because like Dr. Coral says, Dr. Vaughn, he said that, Garrett, technology probably got us into this problem, but it'll be technology that can get us out of it. So we're able to help make a huge impact, and it doesn't cost a lot of money to do. It just takes some manpower and effort. So again, if you guys are into coral restoration, I even know grease monkeys that have bought this book because I talk about it so much. Check it out. It's good stuff. See you guys.